In terms of your origin story, so just tell me a little bit back up. I'm assuming just by your beautiful face, you're somewhere in your middle 30s, roughly. How did you get to this space? What were you doing before you got into the non-recruiting business?
I I was failing at varieties of inside sales and outside sales. I was failing miserably. I was giving less than C plus effort for the most part. I was excelling with chatting with friends, overpaying for things that I couldn't afford. I was excelling at partying on the weekends. And yeah, I was extremely unsuccessful from post college. You're pretty close there. I'll be 40 next year, Devo. But I failed miserably in sales for the first 3 years of post college.
Mm,
And frankly, it's because I couldn't come to grips with like what it meant to be a grown up. I
mhm.
had like a very fortunate upbringing. I own that because I think that shaped who I am now and kind of the storm that I've gone through in my life. But I walked into a recruiting agency's office in 2011 with a resume in my hand and a bunch of failed sales gigs on my resume and a whole lot of hope. And I was told that this recruiting agency, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what it was about. The only time I'd ever heard about recruiting, it was, with reference to the armed forces. I said, well, that's not going to be a good match for me, and certainly not a good match for America to see me in the armed forces. We're all in a lot more trouble than we thought if that was the case. And, they said, hey, this recruiting agency, they get jobs for people. They help you get jobs. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I walk in there with my resume and a nice suit, and I'm hoping that maybe they can find me my dream job. And instead, they recruited me.
Mm.
And I went into an organization with nothing to lose except for my credit card debt. I had nothing to lose other than perhaps the remaining bit of my dignity in 2011. And I was told that, hey, if you follow this plan, if you follow our training, if you follow what I tell you to do, you're going to be successful. And I grinded and I grinded, and I was given a phone book, and I made 50 to 60 calls every single day, begging for business opportunity, pitching things to people I didn't even know what I was talking about, asking CFOs if they did debits and credits. I had no idea what I was doing, but I stayed the course. I went into it with blind faith. I burned the ships, as they say. And, about 10 years later, I was leading a team. I was leading national training. I was running a recruiting division for high level executives. And so a career was born out of really thin air. And then during COVID, I saw an opportunity. There was a big gap in the market. There was companies, small, mid-sized businesses, growing businesses that, really didn't have the tools, the technique, the aptitude to hire, attract, and engage good people to their company. And they didn't want to rely on a third-party service provider. They didn't want to rely on this kind of transactional service. They wanted to do it themselves. They just didn't know how. And there was no roadmap. There was no playbook. There's no guidance. And I came up with this idea. I pitched it to the old company, and they actually shut me down. Diva, they said, look, if you empower companies to hire great people using their own people, well, they're not going to need our staffing services anymore. And I just thought that was incredibly short-sighted, and the business was born.
So first of all, I love the fact that you found an opportunity and then did something with it because not a lot of people have the gumption to do that. So well done on that. Bravo. I do want to go back to something which I sort of found ironic as you were kind of talking a little bit about this, is this idea that you failed at sales, yet you sort of believe that every great leader sort of has to incorporate sales.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, you just may have been young and immature and not really had this sort of matriculation to understand that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what I think I found most remarkable, sort of in my conversation of knowing you so far, is that not only do you have the nose for being able to see these things and these opportunities, but you also have the balls and the gumption to do something about it. This gap that you talked about. So why is that? I'm just curious. Why do small to mid-sized companies not have the ability to find the right talent?
Mhm.
Because from what I can tell, there's a shit ton of people out there looking for jobs.
Right.
Like I literally get hit up on a daily basis from somebody dropping me a resume. So why do small to mid-sized companies not spend more time themselves on developing and matriculating some sort of, you saying financially? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, that's just yeah, how I think, how I guess I tinker to start to think
Oh,
about
I
things.
thought you were
But
saying it was, I thought you were giving it was a money problem.
money, look, that's an easy scapegoat. It's funny you mentioned that because money's an easy scapegoat, right? I hear that a lot from business leaders. They say, "Hey, my HR team told me that we're just not paying enough." Is that right? Matter of fact, my wife's colleague mentioned it to my wife this week, saying that, "Hey, we can't get the right people because we're not paying enough," and that's an easy scapegoat, right?
Mhm.
It's easy, and we always look at, yeah, money's important, of course, but no amount of money makes a bad job good. I'm a believer in that. Money's important. Money's always going to be a factor, but the fact that you can't get the right people because you're not paying enough for the job is incorrect.
Mm.
It's incorrect. And the gap, I mentioned it earlier, it's two things. It's that companies don't devote enough time
Mhm.
to recruiting and hiring efforts, or they devote too much time to the hiring life cycle, meaning the interview phases and decision making phases. Or number two, they don't have salesmanship.
Mm.
They lack salesmanship. And treating recruitment and hiring activities as a check the box activity, a line item, a task list of to dos is the quickest way to mess something up throughout the course of a hiring life cycle. It's the easiest way to mess it up
Can
because
I add a third
dealing
piece to
with
that, if you don't
people.
mind?
Go for
Sorry.
it.
Can I add a third piece of that? Because I used to work in the corporate world for many years, and not that I was in HR, but because I was a high level manager in the company, I had the opportunity to, and because there was a cute girl that worked in HR at the time, I had the opportunity to sort of interact in that space a lot and kind of hear what was going on and whatnot. And one of the things that I learned early on, because I was responsible for hiring my own team,
Mm,
is that the company didn't exactly know what they were actually looking for, nor do they do a very good job of understanding the type of positions that fit the type of people
yeah.
most impactfully. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
Misalignment.
yeah, and so they would just basically hire what was on the resume or whatever checked off the boilerplate that they had. And resumes, resumes can be bullshit. And so then they would get people into these positions, have no sustainability around it, and then wonder why people were leaving or leaving the company.
Yeah.
And I pointed this out early on. I was like, why don't you guys stop hiring people and start hiring better for fit and sort of understand and then be able to move people around within the company itself based upon like ongoing. You do these ongoing quarterly reviews. Well, why don't you actually do something with those reviews? If you see that someone is potentially underperforming, why can't you assess this from a more pragmatic point of view and say, let's reverse engineer this? Why are they underperforming? Like, is this a human issue? Is this the individual issue, or are they just in the wrong job? And I always never understood why they would just sort of like just stay like with these blinders on all the time. Any feedback on that?
Yeah, as part of our programs, I'll just give a little plug to the Smart Hire program. We have an exercise called acceptable candidate personas, and one of the things that to absolutely agree with what you said there, that people fall in love, business leaders, hiring authorities fall in love with an idea,
Mm.
and they fall in love with a concept. Or they absolutely have biases on a certain concept. We call that the X syndrome, right? Thinking of an ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, ex-wife.
Mm.
And you absolutely don't want the ex or anything to do that's like the ex. Oh, we had someone like that before and they didn't work out,
Mm.
right? So anything, their biases are blocked towards that kind of candidate.
Mm.
On the other side, there's a bias of the halo effect you alluded to, where a business leader or a hiring manager falls in love with some certain credential. Maybe it's a reflection of their own background, or I can see myself in them. I can kind of see that this is a younger version of me. Or they worked at PepsiCo or, Honeywell, or now we're name dropping, right? But they worked for some kind of household name that's very reputable and potentially sexy, and people fall in love with it.
Mm.
And they just assume that that person has had some high quality training and development. They've been tested at a higher pedigree. So coming to our organization, wow, this is going to blow our doors off as a business because we got this person who used to work at IBM.